Hello, this is Biology Chemistry, Unit 1, Lesson 2 on the scientific method, and this is video number 1. So we are going to talk about what is the scientific method. So the scientific method is a process used by scientists to study the world around them. And it's basically there to ask, somebody has a question, they follow this process in order to come up with an answer to something that is asked. And it is a very rigorous process that everything goes through. And this is basically how we know all of the stuff that we know when you talk about biology, chemistry, physics, or any of the other sciences or subsets of those sciences. So this process tests whether statements are accurate or true with repeatable results. And that is a really big part of this is repeatable results. So scientists are going to test the same thing over and over and over again to make sure that they get the same results. So what is this process? What are the steps? And in this video, we're going to go over the first 2 steps. First step is identify the problem. So it could be anything, but it has to be something that we can design an experiment with, and we have to be able to figure it out. So we have to identify the problem is forming a question that can be tested. So this is called a scientific question. So it must be measurable. So we have to be able to measure something. And where does this question come from? It comes from observation. So observation is nothing more than using the 5 senses to gather information. So those 5 senses are the ones that you learned about in elementary school: hearing, touch, taste, smell, and sight. So we take in this information that we gather, and then we use our brain. We use our brain to come up with questions, something that we can test. And another big part of this is background research. Background research can take a long time because there's a lot of information out there, and we're getting new information all the time. So background information is information that is already known about the scientific question. So when you're doing this and you're doing background research, you might already have somebody that identified the same problem, measured things, observed, came up with all of these different things, hypothesis, all the other steps, and have already answered the question. Maybe you're going to do an offshoot of that. So what you have to do is we look at what are known as scientific journals. These are our primary sources. So this is where people report all their knowledge on different things that they have tested. So they've gone through the scientific method, they publish this in these scientific journals, and they're very hard to read. So you can go on the internet and you can look at scientific journals. They're in all different fields of study, but they are peer-reviewed, which means that in order for them to be published, people that are experts in that area actually go through it and make sure that it holds up, that they went through the scientific method, that they did everything correctly, and that they answered the question that they made. So once you've done all of this, now we take all this information that we researched, we take our observations, and we formulate a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a possible explanation for your observations or an answer to a scientific question. Now, a lot of times you'll see a hypothesis definition as an educated guess. I really don't like the word guess. Educated, great, because educated means that it has to have some meat behind it. That's because you did all this background research. But it's not really a guess because you're using a lot of information to come up with this explanation or an answer to that question. But in order for a hypothesis to be really good, it must be testable and measurable. So we saw those two things in identifying the problem. So that means if it is testable, measurable, it can be proven. So it can be true, it can be partially true, or false. So if it's partially true, you might have to go back and identify a problem you had with the hypothesis and work through the whole process again and make a new hypothesis. But for our purposes, what we're going to do in this class is we're going to write a hypothesis as an if-then statement. So some examples of that, and these are really simple examples, but they are hypotheses. If you drop a ball, comma, then it will hit the ground. So can we test that? Yep, we can have a ball, we can drop it. Can we measure it? Yes, it either hits the ground or it doesn't hit the ground. So that is a good hypothesis. Very simple, and we know based on our observation that if we drop a ball, it's going to hit the ground. So that hypothesis we know is true. 2, if you eat moldy bread, then you will get sick. So we know that moldy bread, we usually throw it away if our bread is moldy. But let's say that you eat it. You could eat it. You could see if you get sick or not. It's testable, it's measurable, but you may or may not get sick. So this could be partially true. Here's another one in our last example problem. If you study for 1 hour for the next test, then you will get a good grade. So you could do this. It's testable, it's measurable, but with this, it's not the best statement because good to me might be different than good to you. So we would have to fix this part of it to make it better. Maybe you think good is an A or B, so you could write higher than a C. So it has to be fairly specific. We have to make sure that we put things in there that can be measured easily, because good means a whole lot of things to a whole lot of people. It can be very different. People could say it's a D or higher, a C or higher, or only an A is a good grade. That's up to the person that's there. So we want to make sure that that's measurable. So we say higher than a C instead of good.